he said to all these record company executives, we want you to change the lyrical content and the overall structure of the records you put out, specifically the genre known as gangster rap within hip-hop, because we want young, predominantly black males who listen to this music to adopt petty criminal lifestyles in emulation of their heroes. And before you knew it, the private prison complex in America was absolutely full of young males who presumably had been led astray to a certain degree by what they were listening to in these rap records.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Hey troublemakers, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I've got a great first-time guest coming on. His name is Mark Devlin, coming in from the United Kingdom, which is a whole other story when it gets into the Queen, but we won't even get into that stuff. But he's really done a lot of research. He actually was a club DJ and stuff like that. We'll get into his background. But around 2010, he started to realize that the music industry is mostly used just for essentially mind control purposes, for promoting certain agendas, basically the exact same thing we see with the mainstream media and all that. But we've never covered this angle of it, and I'm actually quite aware of most of these things that he talks about, but not all of them, because he's researched them so much, so I'll be really interested to hear his exact perspective on things. But basically everyone that you see that's on TV, television programming, when it comes to basically anything, and that includes entertainment, and that includes music, and a lot of people know this about Hollywood already, but I don't think everyone's fully aware about the music industry, just how much it's controlled. We'll get into all of that. So real pleasure to have you on, Mark. I'm really looking forward to it. You've written a book called Musical Truth. You had the first volume come out. The second volume is coming out soon. You've been giving some talks lately entitled No More Heroes, essentially saying if you see these people on TV, they're probably there for some sort of agenda, and you should be aware of it. So Mark, we want to get into all that, but the first question I got to ask you is, how did you become an anarchist?
All right, well, Jeff, thanks for getting me on. Really appreciate that. I'm an anarchist in sentiment. I'm not much of a boots-on-the-ground activist, so I don't get the opportunity to go out there and take part in events and stuff like that. But certainly in terms of my mindset and my ethos, I'm absolutely with the whole idea of being an anarchist. I came to an understanding about 8 years ago about everyone's personal sovereignty and the right to live their life as they see fit, so long as it doesn't cause harm to other people. It's the non-aggression principle of natural law, or consequentialism, cause and effect, spiritual law, karmic law, call it what you will. And it's something that I came to understand very early on in my journey, that we're not supposed to have masters. We are supposed to be sovereign individuals, and we're supposed to be responsible for our own thoughts, behaviors, and actions. And really, when this information started to resonate with me, it felt as if it was something I'd always known, that I'd always understood. And I've looked into things like the concepts of reincarnation and past life regression and the things that you can learn from previous experiences which our spirit souls may well have undergone in this physical realm. And I really do feel that there was some familiarity on my part with these dynamics before I came across this information this time round. It just kind of rang true. It just had a buzz about it that made sense to me. So I think it's something that I've always known, and I think it's something that people generally know deep down in themselves, that we are free. We might be enslaved within a political system. We might have to adhere to the dictates of a governmental control system, although there are ways, of course, of extricating yourself from that. But inherently, we are free, sovereign beings in creation. And so that's just an understanding that I came to take on a few years ago, and it's dictated my actions to this point, I would say.
That's great, an excellent answer, and I agree with everything you just said. And I think people really are, at a fundamental level, realize that they're not supposed to be controlled and owned by other people without their permission. But because they spend decades, literally decades, we're going to get into this, starts with just what they do in the hospitals now with a lot of young kids, injecting them with all kinds of stuff, sometimes cutting off half the skin of the penis of a young boy to traumatize him for life and make it so he can't have a full physical connection ever again, sexually or physically, and going into all the other things they do. Almost very quickly, the government indoctrination camps, doing their pledges of allegiance, memorizing information, being taught how to be a follower and not an actual creative person, which we're all meant to be, in various forms. It could be quite small. You could be creative. I'm really good at making bathrooms look nice. I'm good at, that's my creativity. That's great. That's your creativity. We all have that creativity inside of us in different ways, but they try to keep that away from us, and it goes into the television programming, and I've talked about this so many times. It's literally it's called programming for a reason. It's literally brainwashing. And then, of course, Hollywood movies, all the exact same thing. Basically, everything that your average person in the West sees today is all propaganda and an agenda and all that sort of thing. But the one area that we haven't talked about here that you really cover that's sort of your specialty, is how the music industry is really controlled in those ways. So start wherever you'd like in telling people who haven't heard this before what's going on in the entertainment business.
Right. Well, I wanted to present a subject area to your audience today, which I think will be of interest and which I think is absolutely relevant to the sort of stuff that you get into and the whole anarchist movement. So obviously, many of us understand that governments and an elite ruling class is bad, and we should not be giving any kind of value or power to it or any kind of validity to it. And we vow not to give up any of our sovereignty to these types of institutions. But I think where a lot of people come unstuck in this regard is where it comes to culture and entertainment and celebrities, because we don't tend to think of these people in the same realm as politicians and those that like to try and tell us what to do in our lives. We're off our guard when it comes to entertainment. So most people, when they're watching a movie or when they come home from a hard day at work and they just want to unwind in front of their favorite TV show, or when they go to see their favorite band play a concert, or when they're listening to a favorite album, they're not expecting to be mind controlled. They're not expecting to be socially engineered. They're not expecting to have their values and their perceptions and their belief systems and even their prejudices shaped and formed for them. But this is the way it's so often achieved, because our guard is down. We think of entertainment as just some fun pastime that we choose to do in our, whatever downtime we get. But it's a very powerful weapon for that reason, because people don't expect it to be used for that. In my research a couple of years ago, I came across the whole concept of lifetime actors, culture creation, and social engineering. And this is the shaping of these value systems and these beliefs, which is done largely under the radar. It was summed up very succinctly by this guy, Edward Bernays, who was the double nephew of Sigmund Freud. He was a master propagandist, and he's known as the father of PR. He basically invented the whole concept of public relations, of companies having that aspect to their activities so that they could formulate a viewpoint or an opinion of themselves in the general public mindset. And he was very effective at it. And let me just grab this quote here, because I always use this. It's very to the point, it's very profound, and it really sums up the dynamic we're talking about here. This is from the opening page of Propaganda by Edward Bernays, who lived from 1891 to 1995. So he was 103 years old when he died, because there was no chemtrails in those days, right? So this was published in 1928. He said, "We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we've never heard of. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world." And this guy was a real piece of work. Among his various credits, he got Americans into the idea of eating bacon and eggs for breakfast, which might sound crazy, but that whole thing started somewhere, right? So he was employed by a bacon company, a meat manufacturing company, and they wanted to increase their sales. And Bernays was very good at linking with medical professionals like doctors and dentists and getting them on board, because he understood that if a statement was seen to come from a perceived professional like a qualified doctor, it was going to carry more weight in the public mindset than somebody else putting out that information. So he got a bunch of doctors to sign these documents to say they felt that the best way for Americans to start the day was on bacon and eggs, because they got all the protein and all the nutrition they needed to see them through the working day. So that was a very successful campaign. He was also the guy that linked with the American Dental Association to see to it that fluoride, sodium fluoride, was put into the water supply of the US, and of course many other countries subsequently. He was employed by an aluminium, or aluminum, as I guess you Americans would say, but in Britain we call it aluminium. One of these manufacturing plants, they had this byproduct, this poisonous byproduct of fluoride, which was something they needed to dispose of. And so he very successfully saw to it that it got put in the water supply of the American public, and all the health problems that's led to. That's just a couple of things that he was involved with. So he's got a lot to answer for, and he really invented this whole concept of propaganda, of companies and individuals putting forward a public image of themselves that they want everyone to lap up and swallow. And when it comes to these celebrities, anyone who's in the public eye, if you walk down the average street and say to anyone you meet, have you heard of such and such? And the answer is yes, then that person will have been placed in the public eye to adhere to some kind of agenda or other. And we don't really know these people. All we get from them is the public relations version of them, the Wikipedia version of them, the aspects of these people that they want the public to see. So we don't see what happens when they walk off stage. We don't see what happens when the cameras stop turning. And one thing I've come to understand through my research is when you do a bit of digging into the backgrounds of these individuals, in terms of so often their families, the bloodlines, their genealogy, their ancestry, where they come from in that regard, and also their affiliations, you find some very interesting things. Because time and time again, Jeff, you find links into the worlds of military intelligence, into the worlds of academia, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Cambridge universities, secret society fraternities like Skull and Bones coming out of Yale, the Bohemian Club, Bohemian Grove, the Century Club, Bullingdon Boys Club out of Oxford University. You find links into dark occult groups like the Church of Satan and the Process Church of the Final Judgment. And you find links into government and expressions of the establishment, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, the White House. Links to US presidents coming through the bloodlines of many of these celebrities. These are things that you really wouldn't expect to find on the surface, but when you actually do the due diligence to dive into the research, some of the results that you turn up are absolutely staggering. And it just reinforces this whole idea that people in the public eye are not who we thought they were. There are many, many examples we can get into.
Yeah, and let's get into some of them. But for your average person out there, this might sound crazy, right? But I've looked into this stuff enough now that I know there's zero doubt about this. And in fact, you can watch so many. If you actually look for it, I'm sure you've done this yourself many times. If you look for it, you can find many of these celebrities actually saying this is what on, but they say it in really kind of funny terms. For example, Beyonce says she gets taken over by some, I think she even calls it a demonic entity when she goes on stage. Bob Dylan did an interview with 60 Minutes where he said he sold his soul to become famous. But and they asked him, who'd you sell it to? And it was quite clear who he had sold it to. In many ways, a lot of them will actually even talk about this stuff, but they don't do it in formats that your average person is really paying attention to. And because of all the brainwashing, a lot of the times they don't really understand or think about it. They're like, oh, well, I guess Beyonce gets kind of possessed by demons when she goes on stage. Like, well, that's cool. Yeah, she's really good. I really like how she dances and all that kind of stuff. I guess for your average person out there who doesn't know what we know, and you know way more than me about this particular topic, but I know a fair amount. I guess there's two questions they're probably asking right now. One is every major famous entertainer you see on television or radio or whatever it is, are they all actually controlled? Or do a few slip through? And you probably got a good answer to that. I've got a few ideas of my own. I think a few do slip through, especially if they're not that popular yet. But when you get to the point where you're performing in the Super Bowl, you're one of them, basically. The second question they might have, though, is if they believe this, it might be happening, do all the people who are actually controlled, are they even aware of being controlled? So those would be the two questions. Is there some people that you do see on TV that are actually fairly real people? And secondly, do all the people who are controlled, do they actually even know they're controlled?
Well, they're good questions. And to address the first one, I think there are two leagues that we're dealing with. There are those that come from these specific bloodlines, and they go back many generations. And what happens is these people are ushered into public roles to have an influence on culture, to have an influence on society. Some of them are put into the world of politics. Some of them are put into the world of music as prominent musicians. Some of them are put into Hollywood movies as actors. Some of them become TV presenters. Some of them become sports stars. What I think there is a whole load of lifetime actor training schools and foundations and institutions where these people go to become very good at their craft, whatever it is they've been put into. So they learn to become very eloquent politicians. They learn to become very convincing actors. They learn to become very accomplished, skilled musicians, so that when they appear in these public roles, they seem to be sincere, they seem to be genuine, and they get people on their side. I think when money is no object, lifetime actors get the very best training. So there are those that come through the bloodlines that get that kind of attention. Then I believe there are what I refer to as chosen ones. And these would be individuals that exhibit a certain amount of skill and talent under their own steam, off their own backs, and they get spotted early on in the game. So there would be individuals working for the music industry and for Hollywood and all these other institutions whose job it is to look out for those that are showing some promise in these areas. And it's at this point where they step in and they offer them literally an offer that they can't refuse, a glittering contract. They're offered the opportunity to sell their soul for fame and fortune, to use that metaphor. But I would suggest that that is what's really going on in so many cases, and it's not a metaphor at all. And I think these chosen ones then are given the opportunity to ascend to the very high levels of the industry, so long as they do what their controllers tell them and they adhere to whatever agenda is set out for them. I think you can also
just
tell...
to briefly cut you off, some of the people that I would kind of guess that didn't fully sign that contract, they're pretty much all dead, right? Amy Winehouse, maybe. I'm just guessing. I haven't looked into any of them too much. Kurt Cobain, maybe. You can kind of see what happens if they accept or not, right?
Right. Well, I think you can tell the ones that have been the most cooperative with their agendas, because they're the ones that go on to have success decade after decade. And they're also the ones that become sirs. You can get into the whole issue of knighthoods that come from the British Empire, the British monarchy. Sir this, Lord that. So we've got Sir Paul McCartney, Sir Elton John, Sir Mick Jagger, Sir Cliff Richard. So whenever you get people like that, Sir Tom Jones, that have had careers lasting 40 or 50 years, it's pretty clear they are key players in this scene. But you can also factor in artists such as, you mentioned Amy Winehouse. We could think of Michael Jackson. We could think of Prince. We could think of Whitney Houston. We could think of George Michael.
All dead.
I think there are instances where certain celebrities start to become a bit of a pain in the arse, and they start to become a bit of a thorn in the side for the control system and the institutions that spawned them. So with Prince, for example, he went on this Tavis Smiley chat show in 2009, famously, and started talking about chemtrails, geoengineering, on a chat show being watched by millions, which you're not really supposed to do when you're a controlled asset of the system. George Michael and Michael Jackson and Prince all went up against their respective record companies, that's the Sony Corporation, and in the case of Prince, Warner Brothers, to try and rid themselves of the restrictive nature of the contracts that they had. And in Prince's case, he was trying to regain ownership of his own master tapes. All three of them became very outspoken about what goes on in the industry and about how artists are exploited by these record corporations. So you can imagine they didn't exactly ingratiate themselves to those that controlled them in those instances. And when you think of Prince, Michael Jackson and George Michael, we know how it ended for all of those. Another factor which you have to consider, and I went into this very heavily in my first book, and it's really something that warrants a whole show on its own, but I'm sure many people will be familiar with it, is the concept of mind control, trauma-based mind control programming, which is absolutely rampant and endemic throughout the entertainment industries. Many of your favorite Hollywood actors, many of your favorite musicians will have been subject to this. I know it sounds fantastic and outrageous to people the first time they hear it, but there are acres and days and weeks of evidence to show that this goes on. And I think it's a way of ensuring that many of these celebrities adhere to the program, to the script, and they don't start asserting their own individuality. They don't become maverick free spirits. But every now and again, the programming starts to wear off, and these people start to regain some of their humanity. They start to remember who they are. Some of their innate spirituality starts to bleed through. I think we saw that with a number of artists. I think that's what we saw starting to happen with Michael Jackson, with Prince. There was the incident with Britney Spears, famously, where she shaved all her hair off in 2007 and started going a bit crazy, attacking cars with umbrellas. That's a classic sign of the mind control programming starting to wear off and these people starting to remember where they came from. So that's a big danger for the controllers, when these people can no longer be controlled in that way. So I think the mind control programming is reserved for certain individuals within the ranks of the industries. But when it comes to the likes of the Mick Jaggers and the Paul McCartneys and the Bob Dylans and the Tom Jones and the Rod Stewarts and the Elton Johns, these people have always struck me as willing participants. They've struck me as being absolutely down with the program. Bono would be another one. You know, they seem to be very keen players. Jay-Z, another example. There doesn't appear to be any need to mind control these individuals because they want the fame and fortune so badly that they're prepared to do whatever it takes to maintain that position. I think that's a dynamic we've seen over the decades as well.
Yeah, you brought up Jay-Z. His record label is Rockefeller Records. He knew exactly what he was doing from the get-go. He wanted to be part of the club, and he became part of the club along with Beyonce, who got co-opted along the way and mind-controlled. And, you know, there's been so many instances of that. You brought up Britney Spears. Still to this day, one of the weirdest things is that one interview with her where she just totally went into two different personalities. We'll play that clip right now.
This spasm of publicity about what happened from Mexico to London.
It was pretty rough, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew. Strong Brittany. Yeah, it was a weird time. Ew. I'm embarrassed. Can we stop this?
And yeah, so many seem to sort of break control. I guess the latest one that looks like might be, you never know. That's the thing. You can't tell. All this stuff is so controlled. But it looks like the latest one is Kanye West. Have you been watching that one?
Absolutely. Kanye West is another textbook example. He went on that famous rant at the end of his concert in Sacramento in 2016, right about the time of the US election. And he's up there on stage ranting for about 20 minutes. Talking about, I'm on my Trump shit, and you know he's bigging up Donald Trump. He's talking about Jay-Z in terms as if Jay-Z is his mind control handler. He's saying things like, Jay, don't be sending those killers up in my head now. He says that several times. And in the end, Kanye West had to be forcibly led off that stage and handcuffed to a gurney and taken away for psychiatric evaluation. This happens many times. There's a particular establishment in LA known as the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And I mentioned this in volume 1 of my book because it's notorious for celebrities being rushed there whenever they have any kind of meltdown. So we've seen it in so many occasions. So Kanye West was taken there. Charlie Sheen, when he started ranting about 9/11 being some kind of inside job, was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Notorious B.I.G., after he was shot up, was reportedly taken to Cedars-Sinai. So many celebrities are. I think that will turn out to be a covert mind control facility where so much of this goes on. And there are certain other locations as well. But Kanye started out as a very promising artist. He made some very conscious music on his first album, and he really came across as like a breath of fresh air to the hip-hop industry because he wasn't talking about the same old garbage and trash that most other A-list rappers were. But as the years
Which was all on
progressed-
purpose, too, we should just point out. The entire gangster rap thing came as an agenda to try to really screw up the black community in general. We could go into that, but you can carry on. We can go back to that or whatever.
Well, that's right. Yeah, just to make brief reference to that, this again is something that I've talked about in my presentations and which crops up in the book. There was an insider from the music industry who came forward a few years ago saying that he was invited to a meeting in LA in 1991, and present at this meeting were executives from all the big record labels of the time, and they wheeled in this guest who presented himself as being a representative of the private prison complex industry in America. And to cut a long story short, he said to all these record company executives, we want you to change the lyrical content and the overall structure of the records you put out, specifically the genre known as gangster rap within hip-hop, because we want young, predominantly black males who listen to this music to adopt petty criminal lifestyles in emulation of their heroes. So here's another classic example of engineered false heroes and role models that people fall for, because this whole dynamic seemed to work. And before you knew it, the private prison complex in America was absolutely full of young males who presumably had been led astray to a certain degree by what they were listening to in these rap records. So I think there's absolute validity to that. But anyway, Kanye West, after a few years of seeming to be a promising, inspiring, conscious message music maker, went down the same route as everybody else. He was very closely associated with Jay-Z. There's the very strange business of Kanye West's mother dying very suddenly. She went in for cosmetic surgery and she died on the surgeon's table. And Kanye was said to be very cut up about this. He was very close to his mum. He made an album called 808s and Heartbreak, which is very dark and very melancholic. And it's like him really reaching into the depths of his soul to express how he felt about this whole thing. And this brings in suggestions of ritual sacrifice, which goes on in the industry. Again, a very contentious subject, one which many choose to throw out on first mention of it because it sounds so fantastic. But there is actually a lot of evidence to suggest that this goes on. Individuals are required to make blood sacrifices of someone close to them, a family member or a close friend, in order to ascend up those next few levels of success. Again, I would suggest this is something that's not necessary when it comes to the lifetime actors that come out of these bloodlines, but when it comes to chosen ones, in order for them to show just how much they want that fame and fortune and success, this seems to be a measure that's in place in line with the very sick ritualistic belief systems of the occult practitioners that preside over these industries, because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. The individuals and the networks that control the music industry and the entertainment industry at large, and actually every other aspect of daily life. So this goes into the world of politics, it goes into the world of big business, academia, science, the military, everything. We've got occultists, dark occultists who understand the nature of reality, they understand how to manipulate energy, they understand how to bring about physical manifestations of desired situations by applying their will and their intent to a situation. You know, the occult teachings of Aleister Crowley are very important here, because this guy pops up like a bad penny time and time again in the backstory of the music industry. You hear so many musicians revering Aleister Crowley, and he really seems to have been a poster child for the whole music industry. But that's what we're dealing with. Occultists who get involved with ritualistic activity which flies completely over the heads of most people that are consuming this product, listening to these bands, buying these albums, lapping up these artists. They have no idea that there's occult activity going on an unseen level in so many ways through these industries.
Yeah, you brought up so many great things. I have a question for you that I don't know the answer to. I knew a lot of those answers, but not in the exact way that you put them. That's great. But I've started to become aware recently that actually in the music itself, they've got various ways of changing things in your brain, and I became aware. Well, obviously the words are incredibly powerful. So when you're listening to music all day, this is something I just kind of learned and started to do. I used to listen to a lot of gangster rap. I just thought it had good beats and stuff. I liked it, and sometimes the lyrics were pretty good. Yeah, I still listen to it, like "F the Police" by NWA is still one of my favorite songs. But I try not to listen to it too much because it's full of just all kinds of anger and swear words, whatever. But they're kind of like negative energy sort of things. And what I've started to realize is that when you're listening to that stuff all day, it really affects you. And that might be on purpose or not, and you can tell me what you think about that. But if you listen to more like really nice music, so most of the time when I'm working now, I used to listen to like rap or even techno, and I want to ask you about techno because I saw you talking about that at one event, and I didn't hear what you had to say, and I want to hear if that has some programming in it on purpose as well. But in general, when I'm like working now, it's like put on some like meditation music. It's like water bubbling and birds chirping, or maybe something almost classical sounding, just very nice and just stuff like that, because it actually affects your brain. But to what extent, as far as you know, are they actually trying to put in stuff into a lot of the music to really control people's minds?
There's so many ways that they can do it. So they can do it blatantly and overtly through lyrical content. So thinking back to that gangster rap genre where it was all talk of gang banging and running guns and drugs and bitches and hoes and all that kind of thing. That's obvious in your face manipulation. But there are other ways that it can be achieved as well. And a lot of that comes through the science of sound. So I've got a chapter in my new book going into this whole thing, sound frequencies, and the way a record is produced, what the engineer is putting into that recording at its base level, which again is happening on an unseen basis. We've probably all listened to music when we've been driving, those of us that drive, and there are certain records which, when they come on the radio or if you're playing a CD or whatever, they make you want to drive 500 miles an hour. I certainly know records like that. They've got this dynamic, energetic kind of feel, and you find yourself driving a lot faster than you were before that record came on. So that's just one trivial example of the way it can affect you. But sound definitely has a very major effect on the human psyche and on our neurological pathways. It's used for healing. There are so many therapy centers which use sound to treat all manner of physical ailments and diseases, and particularly to bring people out of persistent comas. So when people have been exposed to a favorite piece of music, it's been known to rouse them out of comas that they've been in for months or even years, where everything else has failed. And of course, music can make us feel very calm, and it can be used to unwind after a hard day, as you alluded to just there. But if that can be the case, then the opposite can also be the case, because we live in a reality where we have inversion everywhere, satanic inversion, which is one of the central tenets of this occultic control system that's presiding over the music industry. So if music can be used for healing purposes, it can be also used for very harmful purposes. We can get into the whole area of the tuning pitch, the international standard tuning pitch, which was changed from 432 hertz to 440 hertz. This one seems to come up in every conversation I have. People are fascinated with this one. But most recorded music and most instruments in live concert situations now, and for the past several decades, are using A equals 440 as their standard tuning pitch. And when you speak to musicologists or sound scientists who've looked into all this stuff, they will tell you that 432 is the natural harmonic frequency that resonates and syncs with the human brain waves and the human body rhythms and the earth itself. That's just the natural harmonic choice for us to be listening to music at. But it was deliberately and purposely changed to 440 several decades ago by the Rockefeller Foundation, according to reports, those nice people, to make the music that people listen to appear dissonant and discordant, and to make it kind of grate with us and not sit naturally with us in the way that it should. So that's one level of manipulation that's going on. When it comes to electronic dance music, I have been looking into this a lot in the last couple of years. It's something that I've got a lot of personal investment in, because we're on an anniversary right now, the 30th anniversary of the acid house scene coming out of the UK, 1988. I used to go to those early parties. I was very captivated by the whole scene. Happy to say I never did the ecstasy, never did the drugs. It was just about the music for me. But the legacy of that 3 decades on is that we now have this worldwide electronic dance music scene, which is popular in literally every country in the world. You find clubs and you find dance festivals in every corner of the world, which have swept up millions of young people in their wake. And so many of them go out every single weekend. And part of their socializing ritual involves going to these events where they lap up music, which is electronic and digital in nature in terms of how it's produced. Many of these young people will be taking mind-altering drugs, predominantly ecstasy, which is known as MDMA or Molly in the US these days, but other things as well, LSD and mescaline and all sorts of other psychedelics. And then you've got the fact that these massive dance music festivals now are happening on huge scales with tens of thousands of people in attendance at a time. And if you look at what's being flashed up on the screens at these events, the visuals are often occult, metaphysical, spiritual, esoteric in nature. They're flashing up Egyptian imagery, Masonic imagery, Kabbalistic imagery, themes of ETs and aliens, and just metaphysical, spiritual ideas. So to my mind, this is a pretty deadly combination, or potentially deadly combination, that large numbers of young people are now being exposed to through the electronic dance music scene. You've got music which is loaded with sound frequencies, and again, it's something that can be happening on an unseen level. That's being combined with the effects of mind-altering drugs and the effects of these visuals that are being flashed straight into the subconscious mind of the collective consciousness at these events. So I think there's a very large-scale manipulation that's happening on that scene now, and it's my view that the early roots of it coming out of the acid house scene in 1987-88 were a way of preparing everyone for this, and it was a 30-year lead-in, if you like, to the kind of situation that we've got now. There are many parallels between that early acid house scene and the 60s counterculture hippie scene, which had gone before it 21 years earlier, and they all bear the hallmarks of manipulation from the military intelligence services, the CIA, MI5, MI6, and the Tavistock Institute. These are institutions which crop up time and time again in my research as well. And why should there be any link between military intelligence and the military-industrial complex and the music industry if music is all about having fun, forgetting your worries, letting your hair down, and enjoying some good music at the weekend? That's what it should be, but unfortunately, it's not what we've got.
Yeah, you brought up the sort of the hippie movement, and then to me it was just funny to watch the hippie movement, and then they all became essentially, the baby boomer sort of thing, and now they're all incredibly materialistic, and they have nothing. They're nothing like they were in the '60s. But a lot of people, I've heard this, that whole hippie movement was almost like generated by whatever you want to call this structure, the power structure, whatever it is. And then I heard about, I didn't know a lot of this stuff until maybe in the last year or so, and people were saying, and you can tell me what you think about this, that the Beatles were actually kind of manufactured in much the same way. So it seems like they've been doing this for decades. I don't know how far back it goes, because if you kind of look at Elvis, he kind of looks like he was kind of controlling. Then Marilyn Monroe was totally kind of, seems like she was just the Britney Spears of the time. So it seems to go back and back. So sort of looking back at the past, for a lot of people have a lot of great memories about the 60s or 70s. It's not to say that if it was controlled in various ways that you couldn't enjoy your time or have good memories. Of course you can, but you should be aware that there was more than met the eye with a lot of these movements. Maybe you can talk about that.
Sure. When I started doing this research, I made the mistake of thinking that this level of manipulation, this meddling into the industry, was a relatively recent thing. I thought, well, I've got to look at the 2000s because that's when it started. How naive was I? I found myself going further and further back down the timeline, all the way back through the 70s to the 60s to the 50s to the very inceptions of these industries. And you come to realize that they were set up in the first place, as the Hollywood film scene was, specifically because of the amazing opportunities they offered to mind control large numbers of people under the guise of entertainment when their guard is down. So going back to the very early scene of the 1950s, Elvis Presley, as you mentioned, his handler, his controller was this guy, Colonel Tom Parker. who came out of the world of the military. And Elvis himself had a military career, of course. He showed signs of having been mind controlled. There are stories of him having worked as an undercover intelligence operative. So when he was away on tour in overseas nations, he was supposedly undertaking spying work as well on behalf of
And
his
just
masters.
briefly, one of the other big clues about Elvis is in 1971, I believe it was, or 1970, Richard Nixon, who also took the gold backing away from the dollar, launched the war on drugs, which is just a war on people, which still goes on today and still is one of the most heinous things ever done in the last few decades. And Elvis Presley was actually like the spokesperson for the war on drugs, which is pretty funny considering how he died and everything, but carry on.
Well, it is pretty funny, yeah. Over in the UK, you had Cliff Richard. There's lots to know about Cliff Richard. We can't say too much about him because he was embroiled in this scandal a few years ago where there was a suggestion that he'd been involved in the sexual molestation of minors. And Billy Graham also cropped up in that conversation as well. It was supposedly at a religious event that those two attended. But yeah, there's a lot of murky stuff surrounding Cliff Richard. There's certainly plenty more to know. His father worked for Thorn EMI. And Thorn EMI, as well as being a record label, was also involved in contractual work on behalf of the government. We find this with many of the early record labels. So Parlophone, EMI, Decca, Thorn EMI, there'll be many other examples. These companies, before they started putting out records, worked on things like radar systems and radio control systems on behalf of the military. And then they kind of morphed into these entertainment companies. So that's another red flag. Then as we move into the 60s, you had the two biggest groups coming out of the UK, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And there's quite a lot of information there that appears to cast those groups in a very different light. Mick Jagger came out of the London School of Economics. He was trained as an economist before he just happened to drop out and become this stoner bloody rock icon, you know, like you do. Pretty natural progression, right? Then you got Brian Jones's dad. Brian Jones was the founding member of the Rolling Stones before the others came in, and he was based in Cheltenham, which is the home of GCHQ, which is the UK's version of the NSA, concerned with spying and surveillance. So Brian Jones's dad worked as an aeronautics engineer, again with connections into the British government. You can think of Pink Floyd. Syd Barrett, the founding member of Pink Floyd, his father was a scientist for Cambridge University. He was a pathologist and I think a psychiatrist involved in research, various programs for, again, the British government. The Beatles, there are no direct verifiable links back into those worlds with them, but we certainly had the suggestion from this guy, Dr. John Coleman, who was a former British intelligence officer. He came out and stated that the Beatles were a creation of the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations in London, which is this think tank that's all about affecting culture and value systems. And they have connections into the Frankfurt School, which is into all that stuff as well. So that was his claim. And he also stated that many of these songs that are credited to Lennon and McCartney weren't actually written by them at all, but were written by operatives coming out of the Frankfurt School. I don't know how you would ever prove that, but it's certainly a tantalizing thing to consider. And, you know, there's many links there. John Lennon, in one of his later interviews for Playboy magazine, basically came out and admitted that the whole counterculture LSD scene of the 1960s was put into place by the CIA. You know, he stated, we must always remember to thank the operatives of the CIA for creating this whole scene. And when you look at the work of Dave McGowan...
And then he was killed.
Yeah.
I was just mentioning, and then he was killed. You know, every time one of those guys comes out and actually mentions what they're actually doing, they're pretty quickly gone.
Well, that's right. That's right. And also, people can look at the work of Dave McGowan, and I seem to find myself mentioning him in every interview, but for good reason, because his work is of tremendous value in understanding how culture creation and lifetime actors work. So he put out the book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon a few years ago, and he examined the whole folk rock and psychedelic rock scene that came out of the Laurel Canyon district of Los Angeles in the mid to late 1960s, and basically changed the whole landscape of the music scene in those times, in conjunction with the arrival of large quantities of LSD and in conjunction with all these other society-changing things, like the emergence of the feminist movement under Gloria Steinem, Ms magazine and the arrival of the birth control pill, which all led to these feelings of sexual emancipation and free love. All this stuff went hand in hand. It all emerged at exactly the same time. And McGowan showed through his book that the fingerprints of the intelligence agencies and other aspects of the establishment and of government can be found all throughout that scene, not least through many of the family links coming from the musicians who were very influential in that whole era. The classic example, of course, is Jim Morrison of The Doors. You probably heard this one, but Jim Morrison's dad was a Navy commander, an admiral, George Stephen Morrison, and he was the guy that was in charge of the fleet of ships involved in the Gulf of Tonkin non-incident false flag, which kick-started the Vietnam War and embroiled America in that whole bloody mess for the next decade. So how do you reconcile Jim Morrison being this larger-than-life iconic rock god, being apparently anti-establishment, apparently anti-war, and being the voice of this youthful generation and the poster child for that whole scene, and his dad basically starting the Vietnam War? Well, if that was a one-off isolated incident, you could chalk it up as just one of those things, as people do, because people really do worship these idols and these heroes, as I said at the start. And there are so many people that just aren't hearing it about Jim Morrison. Okay, then we can move on to many of the other prominent musicians coming out of that scene. Frank Zappa, whose father worked in chemical weapons research, biological compounds and such, out of the Edgewood Arsenal military base. David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, who is bloodline actually, comes out of the Van Cortlandt bloodline, coming out of the Netherlands and going back many generations in terms of their manipulation of culture. So he had very heavy connections to the world of the military, and pretty much all the other musicians coming out of that scene did as well, and all those other major groups, as McGowan showed in his work. So there comes a point where it stops just being one of those things. It stops being coincidence. It stops being happenstance, and it starts becoming a trend. And there's something that any high-minded critical thinker needs to start paying attention to. And by the way, Dave McGowan passed away on the 22nd of November, 2015, the anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, after putting out all this revelatory work and setting on their path a whole new generation of researchers, myself included, that very much picked up the baton from him and took his lead to start looking into some of these family backgrounds and these affiliations of these false heroes and role models. And Dave contracted a very fast-acting cancer, which finished him off very swiftly. Whether or not that is coincidence or bad luck, people need to decide for themselves.
Yeah, I've heard too many coincidences now to believe in coincidences, especially when you get to these levels. And it's all quite clear and obvious once you start to see it all. You brought up a false flag, Gulf of Tonkin, of course. Recently in the UK, there was, I think it was Ariana Grande concert where they had, it was either a false flag or a hoax. That one looked like a hoax because not one person caught anything on the 15,000 smartphone cameras of any sort of attack or anything. But even if it was real, like in terms of like some people actually died, 2 days later she was performing again. I don't think she even cried at any press conference or anything. It was clear like she's one of their people and she was picked they're going to do a false flag at her concert. And she does, like, what kind of person, if I had a concert and half my audience is getting shot, I'd take a few days off. I'd need to, think about it a bit, think about what I'm doing. But no, it's everything is so controlled, and it's amazing. A lot of people still haven't woken up to it. I guess a big question would be, and this is a question I have, is, okay, if we know this is all going on, do we just stop listening to music altogether, or can we still listen to it sometimes but be quite aware of what's going on? That's why I wanted to ask you about the electronic music, to see if they've actually been putting anything in the more popular tracks that are actually like hypnotizing, mind control type kind of stuff. I was aware of the hertz thing. I've been trying to listen to mostly electronic music from not too popular DJs at the 432 hertz rather than the 440 for those reasons. I also listen to a number of different things at different hertz for that reason. But I guess for your average person out there, do we have to just turn off all the music? Can we still listen to it? Or are there some decent people in the music industry? Like, what would be your what would you tell your average person? Because most people really like music, so they're not going to be liking this message too much if we're coming to the conclusion that you just have to turn it all off.
That's right. It's a question I get all the time. And my job is a really unpopular one because nobody wants to hear that their chosen personal hero is not who you thought they were. And I get that. Believe me, I get that because I've had to let go many of my own personal holy cows. With me, it was DJ heroes. You know, being a DJ myself, I used to look up to certain other influential DJs and place them on a pedestal and aspire to be like them. And I've discovered some stuff about them. And it's not good. I've come to understand what it is they're a part of and what agendas they're fulfilling, and I can no longer look at them the same way. I've had to throw them out. I've even had to do the same thing with heroes that I used to have on the truth scene, in the truther community. There are one or two names which I'm not going to divulge because I can't be 100% sure, but there's a couple of names that I've had to stop looking at and stop paying attention to because I've discovered some stuff about them which doesn't sit well with me either. So I completely understand why people don't want to hear it about these individuals, these bands, or these scenes, but it is what it is. The information speaks for itself, and you can either handle it or you can't. You're in one class or the other. When it comes to whether you need to throw out all your old music and stop listening to these bands when you discover the true nature of their affiliations, I've never been someone that believes you have to do that. I think once you come to an understanding of who these artists really are, or maybe, and maybe one or two of the agendas that their music might have been used for over the years, you then break the mind control. You break the spell. It's no longer having an effect on you on that subliminal subconscious basis like it was before. And I always liken it to a stage magician or illusionist such as Darren Brown that we have in the UK, or David Blaine would be a good example in the US. You know, these guys go up on stage and they perform what appears to be an impossible trick or illusion. And the audience is watching it thinking, how the hell did he do that? That's just impossible. Every now and again, they do a show where they break down how they achieved one of these stunts. And they walk you through it, and you can see how it was achieved, how it was sleight of hand, or it was distraction, diversion. When you've seen how they do it, you go to yourself, my God, of course, that's how it was done. The next time you see that trick performed in public, you're not going to fall for it, because you know the tactics that were used. And I think it's the same process that needs to take place in the music scene. So people need to get wise as to who these individuals are. They need to get wise as to some of the methods that are put to use in the music industry. But once you have, and once you've gained that understanding, there's no reason why you can't continue to enjoy the music. You know, the Doors were a manipulated, controlled band. So were the Rolling Stones, so were the Beatles, but they made great music. Nothing's going to take away the fact that their music was amazing. And there's no reason why you can't continue to enjoy that. Same with Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page specifically, was into some very dark occult stuff, witchcraft, sorcery. But again, a lot of their records are great. And so I'm not going to advocate that people break all their ties with these groups. Some people have said to me, in private email correspondence, why are you advocating that people continue to listen to these groups when you've just spent all this time telling people how evil they are and what they're a part of? And I say to them, if you want to live your life without any popular music whatsoever, go right ahead. Knock yourself out. It's your choice. Good luck to you. But that's not me. And I'm not recommending that to other people, because for me, a life without music is a life barely worth living. I'm a music man. I love it. It's a big part of my life. So I don't think you need to throw all this stuff out. You can still enjoy it. You just break the mind control, and then you realize that you've understood the game, and now you can just be the consumer that you should always have been able to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess for people out there that are, you know, kind of waking up to this sort of stuff now, I think one of the really interesting things that people could do as they wake up more and more, and there's becomes, instead of hundreds of thousands or millions, there's tens of millions or even maybe hundreds of millions to start to understand what's going on, is when they start doing these things like what they're doing with Kanye West and all that. If the people stop felling, and I don't know Kanye West, I don't know what the deal is or anything, but if the people in general stop falling for all the, they got them from every angle, right? Because they got the controlled people in the music industry, which people like Kanye West, which he kind of has been unprogramming a little bit. So then all of a sudden they put him into the medical system, which is all controlled by them. They put him into the Cedar Sinai, where he gets totally brainwashed and MK mind control, whatever, all that old CIA stuff they've been doing for decades. Then they've got the mainstream media, which they control, which starts coming out. Kanye West is going crazy, all that kind of stuff. If people can start to wake up to that and stop listening to all that stuff, it'd be quite amazing to see what would happen. You'd just see like people like not showing up to certain things, whatever concert it might be, because they know this is being controlled and that sort of a thing. And it'd just be amazing to see an actual, that, everyone talks about, the hippie revolution. It's a revolution. It's a revolution. True revolution will be when people actually wake up to what's going on and stop going along with a lot of these plans.
Well, that's right. And we've got a long way to go in that regard in terms of the general public. The art of discernment has become a lost art. People just accept the individuals that are served up to them. This was brought home to me about 10 years ago when a fellow DJ said to me, oh, there's this new artist that they're about to unleash. Her name's Lady Gaga. She's going to be the next big thing. And I said to him, how do you know she's going to be the next big thing? And he just said, oh, I heard that she was. So doesn't that just sum up the whole dynamic? It's not us, the public, that decides which artists become household names, which ones are going to become our favorites. We're having our favorites dictated to us. The industry creates Lady Gaga. They decide she's going to become the next big thing. She's served up to us as just that. And the general public falls for it hook, line and sinker because they're not thinking for themselves. They're just accepting what the corporations dish up to them. And it's the same with all these public figures. Somebody like Bill Gates, Richard Branson, these business leaders, where do they come from? They just get put into the public eye and people embrace them and adopt them and put them up on pedestals. Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein were described as geniuses. Well, who decides who's a genius? It's not the general public saying, oh, that's Stephen Hawking. Isn't he a genius? It's public relations gurus coming out of the Edward Bernays school that create these personas for these people. What about Jimmy Savile? I'm sure people know all about the antics of another Sir, Jimmy Savile, knighted by the Queen, everything that he got up to. He was described as a national treasure. Who decides who's a national treasure? I think you pretty much had the same thing with Bill Cosby. He was something of an American national treasure until all the revelations emerged about him. So my point is that these people are given to us rather than us, the general public, deciding for ourselves who we're going to have as our icons, as our heroes. I do a podcast called The Sound of Freedom, and it showcases conscious message music from real artists. So for the most part, these are artists that aren't signed to any of the big corporate labels. They're independent. They're expressing their own personal artistry in a very maverick way. And there are some truly stunning artists. One of my favorite rappers is a guy called K Reno. He is the truth. He is the real deal. He's got no corporate affiliations. He doesn't have to worry about upsetting the wrong people. He just gets out there and expresses himself the way he feels to and puts that message out there. There are others, such as a guy called Diesel Automatic, who is based in Montenegro, actually. He puts out incredibly powerful music. There's a female rapper called Elias Clay. There's a guy called Kale Sampson coming out of Canada. And these are all great examples of what happens when artists are just left to express themselves freely and say whatever's on their mind and articulate what so many people out there are thinking, messages that really resonate with them. This is the anarchist spirit coming through music, real music. And so people might want to go and listen to some of that stuff because this is music you never hear on the radio. You don't stand a chance of seeing it on MTV. You're not going to hear it ringing off down the club. You're not going to hear it in the shopping mall. And there's a reason for that, because it's too good. And it comes with inspiring, uplifting messages that the control system don't want people to get access to, but the rest of us do. So people might want to check out The Sound of Freedom. There's some amazing music on there that you might not have heard before, and you might find just changes your life.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask you where I can find some good music, and so we'll put a link to The Sound of Freedom down below, and I'll be checking out myself. You mentioned a few people. I think I've talked to Diesel before. Elias Clay has performed at the last two Anarchapulcos, and I'm pretty sure she'll be coming back again next year. We've got a lot of people like that. In fact, for Anarchapulco 2019, I'm trying to get most of the really good non-establishment rappers that you've probably heard of. I don't want to mention the names because I don't want to screw it up, but no, I don't want to mention them, but you've definitely heard of them, but they're not, they talk about real stuff. They talk about 9/11, all that kind of stuff. And they've been both kind of shunned from being on like the mainstream sort of a thing, but they got very, very close because they're that good. We're going to have all those kind of people here.
You know, Dead Prez is another great group.
Yeah, I love Dead Prez. We talked to them last year. We're probably going to get them this year. I don't want to say, though, because we haven't signed them all yet. But yeah, Dead Prez for sure. I love them.
Yeah, they're the truth.
Yeah, I love Propaganda. So good. Yeah, so that's going to be all in Anarchapulco. So if you've liked this video, you enjoyed it, you may not even know who I am. This is called Anarchast. It's a show about freedom. We're all free. If there's, we're all born free. None of us should be slaves. And if you have a government who's taxing you, extorting you, you are effectively a slave. So this is our podcast. We've been talking all about the music industry. It's been really great with Mark Devlin. And we have an annual conference right here in Acapulco, Mexico. A surprise, surprise, it's not as dangerous as they say in the mainstream media. It's actually one of the nicest places in the world. Everything's the exact opposite of what you're told. And it's every February. It's going to be February 14th to 17th right here in Acapulco, Mexico. We'll put a link to that down below. And Mark, any final comments that you want to say that you didn't get across? And let us know about your book, where we can get it, and anything else you want to let people know. And I just want to throw in, I think we were talking about possibly having you speak at Anarchapulco. We've got an amazing list of speakers already lined up. Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, David Icke, you'll like that one. He'll be speaking.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a conference. Cynthia McKinney, Doug Casey. So we'll definitely be considering you as a speaker if you are interested. I think we did talk about this. So if you're watching this on YouTube down below, if you'd like to see Mark speak at Anarchapulco, throw it in there, and that'll help us decide.
Or maybe even DJ. How about a conscious music DJ set?
Well, that for sure. We can do that for sure. I've been thinking about that. We've got actually huge plans for that. So we'll talk about that afterwards. But go ahead and just give us your final thoughts and where people can find out more information about you.
All right, then. Well, just wrapping up everything that I've spoken about today, I would just get across to people that the golden rule to bear in mind is that celebrities and famous people are not your friend. We think we know them, but we only know the public relations version of them. So we really shouldn't be placing our trust in these people. We really shouldn't be devaluing ourselves by putting any power into these people. The only person that you can ultimately trust, whose motives you know and can understand 100%, is yourself. And you can be your own hero. You don't need celebrities. You don't need icons. You don't need gurus. It's a hard lesson I've had to learn, but I've come to this realization that I can be my own hero, my own guru, and everything that I need is within me. I don't need to externalize any of that to people that I don't know, because they will let you down time and time again. Trust me, I've been there, and many other people have as well. So that having been said, the 2 volumes of my book, Musical Truth, are available on Amazon. So if people want to get it via that portal, then they'll find it up on there. If people want to get a signed copy of the book from me personally, I'm dealing with that. I can mail them out all around the world. If you want to just drop me an email to markdevlinuk@gmail.com, I can make that happen. Other than that, I've got my Sound of Freedom Conscious Music podcast, and I've got a conversation-based one called Good Vibrations. They're both hosted on my Spreaker account and my YouTube, where I post all my conference talks and all my radio interviews, is youtube.com/MarkDevlinTV. Happily, I seem to be flying under the radar when it comes to YouTube censorship still. I know a lot of other researchers have fallen foul of these draconian censorship measures. But at the moment, for the time being, I'm free of all of that. So all my content is still there. So I want to thank everyone for listening to what I had to say today. I want to thank you for hosting me, Jeff. And it's been a great opportunity to get this information across to a new audience.
Yeah, thank you. That was really good information. And, it's kind of interesting how, there's so many things going on in the world even today, like even just this week. I'm never surprised by anything anymore. So I heard about this whole Roseanne Barr thing, and I'm like, well, it's on the mainstream media. It's got to be some sort of agenda. Something's going on. And I don't pay attention much anymore. It's just all, I know what they're doing, basically. And it said, she posted a tweet and she got fired, and everyone's going crazy because that's what the media is saying, is we should all be going crazy about this, so people go crazy because they listen to the media. And I'm like, what was the tweet? And I spent like 10 minutes searching for the tweet. I didn't go on Twitter, stupidly, but I assumed some news article would actually have the tweet. No one had the tweet. So finally I go on Twitter, and I'm looking for it, and eventually I found it. And it was, something about the Planet of the Apes and some woman from Iran or something. I don't know. I'm like, oh, she got fired for that? That's weird. It's not even nothing. It's like nothing. But as I was searching, I found another recent tweet from her saying that George Soros was essentially working with the Nazis in Germany. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what happened. She started to speak too much truth, so she's out of there. I don't know. You might have a final comment. You've been watching that one?
Well, I've missed the recent situation with Roseanne Barr, but I am familiar with her having done a bunch of interviews a few years ago where she spoke about MK Ultra being endemic throughout Hollywood.
Right.
And, she said that she herself had been subject to this kind of programming. And it's not often you get insiders and whistleblowers coming forward, particularly household names, known celebrities, with that type of information. So I certainly respect the fact that she felt bold enough to get up there and talk about this stuff. And people often ask, well, why aren't there more coming forward? Why is it just her? Surely if this was as rampant as she says it is, loads of people would be coming forward to report on it. Well, it's pretty clear what happens to people who do speak out about things they're not supposed to. Prince, anyone? Michael Jackson, George Michael, many other examples. You can understand why celebrities are very reticent to come forward and talk about what it is they're a part of, because their shelf life, their life expectancy isn't always too great beyond that point. There's also the fact that they have so much invested in their careers, of course, financially, and if they were to be ruined, it would create some major hardships in their lives. There's all kinds of reasons why people don't come forward, but every now and again someone does, and they help to shine the light on the truth of what really goes on in these very ugly industries, which on the surface are all glitzy and glamorous, but when you get behind the scenes, they're anything but. And I often say to people, the best thing that can ever happen to you as an aspiring actor or musician or TV presenter or whatever is not making it big in one of these industries. You can enjoy certain levels of success, but you go beyond a certain point where there is no return. And you really don't want to go there. It can never be worth it. That's some advice that I always give to anyone who shows signs of wanting to make it big as a celebrity. It's not the way to go.
Yeah, not to mention, too, I've been in various degrees rich and famous to various degrees. Definitely not famous like Kanye West or anything, but there's nothing that great about it. I've met so many people who have money, lots of money. They're not that happy. I have never wanted to be famous. In fact, I've gone on camera quite begrudgingly years ago because I knew this had to be done, but I don't want to be well known all across the world. It's a weird thing, but some people do. I know, so I used to live in LA. I used to hang out with people like, you might like this, like Tara Reid and Paris Hilton. Paris before she was even famous back in 2000. And
before she was a DJ.
I don't know. I haven't followed them since. I'd be surprised if Tara Reid's still alive from what I saw, but Paris Hilton, and none of them were happy. It was like the unhappiest place in the world, actually. I went to live in Hollywood. It's an interesting side story here. After I sold my internet company, and I had some friends down there like, yeah, we'll hang out with all the celebs and all that. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't care. Like, I never cared about that stuff, but I'm like, it might be interesting. I'll see some interesting things. It was the worst year of my life. It was just like the most depressed people. If there wasn't a giant pile of cocaine nearby, no one could even stand up or get interested in anything.
Right.
It was that's the actual industry when you see it from the inside. I didn't even get really deep in the inside. I was like on the outer layers. I wasn't hanging out with Tom Cruise or any of these people. I was hanging out with like echelons down level kind of people, and it was still really bad. And I didn't see any crazy stuff, obviously, but I hear that is quite common. To, all these things that you hear are quite true from what I've been told from living around that area for a while. So. Yeah, really interesting stuff. I might even want to have you back on at some point because I think there's a lot of stuff we didn't even cover. And I think a lot of people are really interested in this sort of thing. That's one thing I've noticed. Like, I've been trying to get out this information in various ways, but for whatever reason, people really like music. So when they see, oh, we're going to be talking about Kanye West or whoever, they might watch this one. Whereas if I'm like, we're going to talk about a cryptocurrency, they're like, oh, I don't know anything about that or whatever it is. So it might be good just to have you back on, just because we might get more views. I'll be curious to see how many views, because this is probably our most pop culture type episode yet, talking about pop culture. And if you've ever noticed on our channel, it's like 10,000 views. Sometimes I think our highest is 100,000 views. Quite often like 10 or 20,000 views. We'll see what happens though. We'll put some of the celebrity names in this title, and people just click on it. They want to know about these things. So, but they're probably going to find out it's not exactly what they were told. So I'll leave it at that. We'll put
someone's particular personal hero that I've not denigrated and I've not pissed them off this time. Then maybe I'll achieve that next time. We get around to everyone in the end. We don't discriminate.
Yeah, and I too have had many people that I thought I don't consider anyone to be an idol. I think that's weird, but there's people I definitely look up to, and I've had a few that have, they weren't what I thought they were, and that's it's not the best feeling, but. Again, it's not like I looked up to them because I knew everything about their lives. I looked up to them because they did some things that I thought were good. And so that's good. They did some good things I like were good. I can look up to those things. The other things they were doing that are not good, I can just, move on from that. You don't have to attach yourself to these things. And I think that was a really good, what you said, to be your own hero. And I hear that so much. I get actual emails, people saying that I'm their hero. I don't want to be your hero. I want you to be your own hero. I want you to do whatever you do. I'm here doing this. This is something I'm pretty good at now. I think I'm a good communicator. I think that's what I'm good at. Maybe you can make really nice plastic sales ships or something. I don't know what you make, but maybe that's your creativity. Go do that. I'm not your hero. I'm just some guy, and please don't make me your hero, because you see what happens when you make people your heroes. They have to go into this club or not, and either way, it doesn't really work out with them that much. Not that I have any chance of ever getting that popular. But hey, Mark, I see you wriggling around there. Any final comments before we end this?
Just that I get a lot of people now getting in touch with me as a result of having seen my work. They've read the books, they've seen one of my talks on YouTube, they've heard me on a radio interview, and it's almost bordering on some people wanting to put me in that hero category now. And they say, oh, you've been such a great teacher to me, and I see you as a big inspiration, and you're like a guru. And I'm very reticent to get put into that kind of category. That's not something I've ever wanted to be. And so what I always say to people is the most satisfying response that a researcher like me can get is not thank you for the information, you've opened my mind up so much now, but the information you've put forward has made me realize that I need to get on the playing field myself and start making my own personal contribution to turning this situation around, which humanity finds itself in: physical, emotional, spiritual enslavement. You've made me realize what's going on, and I'm now going to change certain aspects of my life and my behaviors and become active in a way that I wasn't previously, in terms of placing obstacles in the path of this control system to make life more difficult for it, and extricating myself from it as far as it's in my power to do so. That's a very satisfying response that somebody like me and the many other people in this field putting out this type of information can get. So that's something that I always enjoy hearing.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way. I get a lot of thank you for doing that. I couldn't have said that. Please try to do it yourself. If it's just us, a few of us kind of doing it, and everyone else is just like clapping, we're not going to get, some change going on in the world.
Well, another thing is, I often get people mailing me saying, oh yeah, I see you've looked into the Beatles and Pink Floyd and stuff. Somebody should look into Black Sabbath some more. Somebody should look into...
Somebody? Who's that somebody?
Somebody should look into Dire Straits. And I'm like, okay, How about you? These people just want to dump this on the doorstep of the small handful of researchers that are already doing the work and just give them more work to do. Well, what's wrong with new people coming on board and doing this research themselves and then bringing what they've found to the table to combine it with the output of everyone else as part of the collective process? That's what needs to happen more, not just the few that are already doing it, doing even more.
Absolutely. Heard that before as well. And so, yeah, this has been great. Really, I didn't know you, Mark, before this. I'd heard about a few of your speeches. You contacted me. I'm so glad to have met you and done this now, because that was one of the better episodes, in my opinion. It was really interesting for me personally, because I didn't know a lot of this stuff. So, and I've said this before, I do a lot of these episodes just as for me to personally learn, and you guys can just watch along with it, and that's great and cool. So I'll leave it at that. We'll play a promo for Anarchapulco 2019. If you liked all this stuff, Mark, I'll bet will be there as a DJ probably. We'll talk about this afterwards, and we're going to have a lot of conscious musicians there. It's going to be huge, actually. People won't believe how massive it's going to be. We'll play the promo for it right after this. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, share down below. Don't be scared. That's another way you can get involved. If you're sitting there going, well, what can I do? Like, share, at least help get the information out there. We need help. We need everyone doing this stuff. Everyone who knows this stuff needs to be doing something, and it can be as easy, and it can be this easy, like, share. That's all you got to do, subscribe. And then that gets this video out there to more and more people. There, you've done your part. It wasn't even that hard. Didn't even hurt your finger. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
There was an idea
to bring together a group of remarkable people
to see if we could become something more.
so when they needed us, we could fight the battles
that they never could.
In time, the state will know what it's like to lose. To feel so desperately that it's right, yet to fail all the same. Dread it. Run from it. Freedom still arrives.
Vacate the state. Engage all the speakers and get this man a microphone.
Fun isn't something that one considers when eradicating tyranny. But this does put a smile on my face.